Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Tanvi. I cover all things about how to be your healthiest and wealthiest self. Today is the start of a very exciting series. This is going to be my home and property series on YouTube. This video is going to be a really chill, chatty video. Why I have decided to buy a property, some of the key factors in making that decision, what my experience so far has been like. I'm not going to be going into too much detail in terms of the property and finance side of things. There's going to be loads of videos on all of that. Basically, this is the start of my property series and it's going to be a really exciting journey that you are all going to be coming along with me on. So why have I decided to buy a property? I feel like I have to say this in every video because there's always new viewers, but I used to work in the corporate world. I worked for a big four company for 4 years. In summer of 2022, I quit my job to do social media and presenting full time. So I've been self-employed for about 1.5 years. Brings me on to my property journey. When I was still working in corporate, there were many times where I considered either renting or buying a property, and this was like 2-3 years ago. Back then I was single, I was working a corporate job, I was working stupidly long hours. Although financially I was probably in a position to do so, it just did not feel like the right time. I was still doing exams, so I just didn't want to take on a mortgage and another financial burden whilst I was studying. I actually really enjoyed living at home while I was doing my exams, and I was on my graduate scheme as well because my parents were so supportive. It was so nice to have them at home to help with things like cooking and laundry and household chores when I was revising for exams. So for a number of different reasons that never happened, and in hindsight I feel like that was such a blessing. Also important to note that I would have been buying by myself because I was single, so I would have been in a really different financial position as well if I was buying on my own. So fast forward to now, I'm self-employed and I'm in a relationship, which brings me on to now, 2024. I am buying a home with my boyfriend. We've been together for 1.5 years, and I know to some people that is alarm bells and it doesn't feel very long, but we are super serious, and I feel like when you know, you know. I get a lot of comments on my TikTok and my Instagram about mortgages are harder to get out of than marriages, and I completely agree. I think they're both equally difficult to get out of, but we have thought about all these things, and we're also signing a deed of trust, which means whatever we put into the property is still ours and the shares of the property are protected. So not to worry guys, but thank you for being concerned for my financial situation. So yes, I'm buying a property with my boyfriend. It is going to be my first home. He actually already has a property, so this will be his second home, and when I do make the finance videos I will definitely flag that we have no first time buyer benefits because of that, but it's okay because we have his experience, his knowledge, and he also has another home. The reason why we have decided to buy a property together is because we're progressing to the next stage of our relationship, and I feel like naturally it gets to that point where you're like, okay, this is my soulmate, this is my forever person, what's next? And I've never been one to rush that process because I feel like it's so important to actually just enjoy dating each other with no financial commitments or no pressure from anyone else, and we're not being pressured by anyone else to do this. This is solely our own decision. We both actively want to buy a home together that we can come home to one another every night in, have a safe space of our own, and the thought of that makes us so happy and so excited, and we want to start building our wealth together. I truly believe that when you're in a relationship, you are there for the long run and you're building a life and your wealth and your property and your investments together. Some people might disagree with that, but we're super transparent about everything in our relationship. When you know you're going to be together for the long run, you're building for your future family and your future life. This just felt like the best and the right next step for us. We obviously have had a lot of questions, especially being two South Asian kids, how our parents are okay with us buying a property, moving in together before I have a ring on my finger, before we're obviously engaged and married. And to be honest, our parents are super supportive of us doing things in an order that suits us and our lifestyle. At the moment, we both live on opposite sides of London. It can take about an hour to get from one to another, which is honestly not that bad in the grand scheme of things. We hate the distance. It's only an hour, but having to go back and forth multiple times during the week, it does get a little bit long, and when we're in a financial position that we don't have to be doing that, we don't want to. That was another reason why we wanted to move out. We've also traveled together so much. Like, our first holiday was actually a 6-week trip to Bali, and those are the best 6 weeks ever. And on top of that, we've been away now, I want to say about 10 times. So We know and we have trialed and tested living together for prolonged periods of time, obviously on our travels. On top of that, both our older brothers have lived with their now fiance and wife before being engaged. So again, I feel like that normalizes the idea within our family that it is actually really healthy, and I think it is such an important thing to do, to live with someone before you commit to a lifetime of marriage with them. I know nothing's going to go wrong, but I would rather live with someone and it go wrong at that point than you have an entire wedding and there's a ring on your finger and then you live together and you find out you don't actually like each other, or you're not as compatible, or you don't enjoy living in each other's space, because that's a bit awkward. The time at which we decided we do want to start looking at properties and having these sorts of discussions was last summer. When we started having these discussions, we also wanted to have these discussions openly and early, and that is something I would definitely recommend from my own experience, is never rush this process, because buying a home is a huge deal. It's a massive life decision. It's probably one of the most expensive decisions you're ever going to make in your life. Buying a property as a whole can be really stressful and really long. There's never any harm in just having Zoopla or Rightmove up and just scrolling and getting an idea of the types of places you like, locations you may want to live in. Also, I would massively advise speaking to a mortgage broker, because it's so important to get a really accurate threshold of what you would be looking to spend, but also what you can afford. The worst thing you want to do in this situation is think you can afford a certain price point and start looking at loads of properties under that price point, and then you actually speak to a broker and you actually break down the figures and you actually understand how many hidden costs there are when it comes to buying a property, and then you get slapped in the face with a huge reality check of maybe you can't afford properties at that price point. So I would always recommend getting a really solid understanding of what your budget is and what you're willing to spend. Things like how much you've saved and how much you can put down for a deposit also come into play. So just get your finances and your understanding of your capacity to borrow in check. Again, I'm going to do another video which is a really detailed step-by-step how to buy a home journey, which is obviously going to be a bit more technical and breaks all these things down, but right now I'm just telling you everything that's popping into my head when it comes to the decisions we sort of made. This is where financial transparency also is really important, especially if you're buying with someone and you're in a relationship. You need to know how much you can both put down for a deposit, and you also need to know how much you both earn to a T to know what your borrowing capacity is. There's no way you're going to be able to reach a decision or get a mortgage without knowing that stuff about each other, and I also would find it wild if you were getting a mortgage without knowing that stuff, because you're clearly not at a point where you're comfortable enough to get a mortgage together anyway. But yeah, financial transparency is super important. We are both super privileged and super lucky, and I acknowledge that we've both lived at home and we both had really comfortable corporate jobs for at least 4 to 5 years. We've managed to save up a really decent sum for our deposit, and it's meant that we don't have to dip into 100% of our savings. It means we still have a comfortable buffer for rainy days, and we don't have to give up our social lives when we do take on a mortgage. I've spoken about this on TikTok, and I know a lot of you found this useful. We could probably be buying a home that is 150, 200k more than what we are, but we actively want to make sure we're taking on a financial burden. That means we also don't have to sacrifice our social lives, our holidays, going out with our friends, families. Of course, when you take on a mortgage, you definitely will have to be way more conscious of how much you're spending and making sure you're not putting additional pressure on yourself. But we wanted to be super conservative about the amount of a mortgage we're taking on, because we are still in our mid-20s and we still want to enjoy our life. But I just feel like that is right for us at this stage. Like, we don't need a garden or a garage, we don't have kids, we don't have pets, and we have so many other beautiful things in this property that make it so worthwhile for us, which I'm going to get into. I'm speaking too much. Take on a mortgage that is actually something you can afford and still continue to live your life under. Now, some of you might be thinking why we've chosen to buy and not rent, and again, it's a really popular question that I've gotten when I've spoken about buying before marriage. Obviously, all of the things I've already mentioned come into play, like the fact that we've already done that whole kind of trial living together, because we've been away 10 times and we've travelled for weeks at a time. So we know that we enjoy living together and we enjoy each other's company enough to commit to purchasing a property. But for us, we live in London and the rental market in London is absolutely insane. So we don't want to have to live in a really awful place or be really stretching ourselves financially to live in a nicer place. which is contributing to paying someone else's mortgage as opposed to our own. So because we can afford to buy, it makes a lot more financial sense for us to build our own wealth, increase our equity versus paying rent towards someone else's mortgage. For us, buying just makes a lot more sense, and I feel like for us, renting would literally just be throwing money down the drain. So yeah, I hope that answers that question. The other thing that we were slightly debating back and forth with was like living in central London and in like zone 1 to 2, or living a little bit further out in the suburb. Both of us right now live in the suburbs, and to be honest, I actually prefer it. I can get to Oxford Street in 28 minutes, and I think that is absolutely insane for someone that lives in zone 6. I personally drive everywhere, and I feel like in central London that is not a thing. I also love the fact that I'm near my family and my friends. I love how much greenery there is around. Like, you can literally see on my road how much greenery there is. I think it's just more peaceful and calm and away from the hustle and bustle of central London. Don't get me wrong, London is my favourite city, and I pretty much spend every day, if not every other day, going back and forth into London for meetings and events. I actually quite enjoy the commute of going into town, listening to a podcast, reading a book, switching off, almost keeping your home and work life somewhat separate, which is hard for someone like me who does social media as it is. Also, let's not state the obvious, the value for money in central London versus the suburbs, the difference is so stark. For what we're getting versus if we wanted the equivalent in central London, we'd probably be paying like 1 to 1.5 million, which is not even an understatement. That is something we, one, are not prepared to do, and two, physically cannot do at this stage of our life. It really did come down to kind of lifestyle and finances, and the decision we've made feels so right and good for us. Obviously, when you're looking for a property anyway, you do have to take in things like location and transport links, and we are super near a tube stop. That's basically our whole kind of decision to buy property together, why we've decided to do it, why now. It's such an exciting time of our lives. Even by the time you see this video, we might have already got the keys. Let's manifest that, and then if so, you will be hearing a lot more about the property update and the home series on my YouTube channel. Stay tuned. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, because you will be the first to see all of these videos that obviously are way more informative and give you way more behind the scenes than my Instagram and TikTok do. And I am so excited to be sharing this journey with you guys. And thank you as well to everyone that supports me and watches my videos and supports my content, because that is my job, that is my livelihood, and that is also the reason why I'm in a position where I can afford to buy a home now. So thank you so much, guys. Love you lots, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.